Snow soaked through Ethan's gloves as he scooped the helpless puppies into his arms, cradling them under his jacket to share whatever warmth his body could offer. Their tiny whimpers were faint, strained, the kind of sound that made something tighten in a man's chest. He didn't know who they belonged to, or how long they had been trapped, but it didn't matter. He had carried injured soldiers through war zones with less urgency than he now carried these trembling creatures. The wind cut across his face as he trudged back toward his truck, boots sinking deep with every step. The storm was worsening, visibility dropping, temperature plunging fast, but he kept his pace steady. "Just hold on," he whispered to the smallest pup, the one barely moving. "You're not dying out here. Not on my watch." His truck's engine sputtered before roaring to life, heater blasting as he wrapped the puppies in his spare coat. The little bodies curled instinctively into the warmth, two of them letting out weak sighs. But the third, the tiny brown one, lay frighteningly still. Ethan swallowed hard. He had seen this look before in men who had been wounded beyond what medicine could fix, their bodies giving up before the world gave them a chance. He rubbed the puppy's chest gently, then more firmly. "Come on, buddy. Breathe." A faint flutter responded beneath his fingers, so soft he almost thought he imagined it. The drive back to town was slow and tense. The snowstorm blurred the lines of the road until everything looked the same, white, endless, dangerous. Ethan leaned forward, eyes narrowed, gripping the wheel with one hand while keeping the other on the pups to feel them breathing. He had lived through ambushes, underwater blackout drills, and nights with gunfire snapping so close it rang in his skull, but for some reason, this drive felt harder than all of it. When he pulled up to the small cabin he had rented on the outskirts of Timber Ridge, his porch light flickered in the wind. He kicked the door open with his shoulder and hurried inside, setting the pups onto a blanket near the fireplace. Flames crackled softly, casting amber light over the room as he wrapped the shivering bodies in towels and warmed them with slow, careful hands. Minutes passed. Then the smallest pup's ear twitched. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "There you go," he murmured. "Fight a little longer." He mixed warm goat milk, whatever he had, and fed them drop by drop with a syringe. One puppy latched quickly, another made tiny smacking sounds. The quiet brown one struggled at first, but then, finally, accepted a few drops. Relief washed over him like heat. Outside, the storm raged against the windows, but inside the cabin, the smallest spark of life thawed the coldness of the night. Still, Ethan knew something was wrong. Puppies didn't end up half buried in a ravine by accident. Someone had left them there. Someone had meant for them not to be found. He sat back on his heels, staring at the three tiny bodies nestled against each other. "Who threw you away?" he whispered. A distant sound startled him, a car door slamming somewhere in the dark, too close to be a coincidence. His head snapped toward the window, instincts flaring awake. He stood slowly, stepping away from the pups, every muscle remembering the discipline of years in service. The cabin's heater hummed. The fire popped softly. Snow tapped against the glass like fingertips. Another sound, crunching footsteps. Someone was outside. Someone who didn't want those puppies saved. Ethan's jaw tightened. "If you came back for them," he muttered, his voice dropping low. Then, unexpectedly, a small knock sounded at the door, light, hesitant, almost childlike. He froze. It wasn't the sound of a threat. It was the sound of someone who was frightened. He opened the door slowly. A young girl stood there, maybe 12, wrapped in a thin hoodie, snow in her hair, shaking violently from cold and fear. Her lips were blue, her eyes wide and wet. Behind her, no car, no footprints except hers. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling. Did you find them?" "The puppies." Ethan's breath caught. He hadn't expected this, and certainly not her. She looked down at her boots, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I didn't mean for them to get hurt. I tried to stop him. I tried." But she broke off, sobbing into her hands. Ethan knelt in front of her, gentle but firm. "You're safe now. Tell me what happened." Her shoulders shook harder, and she whispered, "My stepdad. He threw them into the ravine, and he said if I told anyone, he'd do worse." Her voice cracked, and inside Ethan, something old and fierce awoke. if you were standing on that snowy porch with Ethan, what would you have done? Be honest, comment your answer below. And if you're not sure what to say, just tap like to show that compassion still matters. Ethan guided the trembling girl inside, closing the door quickly to keep the storm from swallowing the warmth. She hovered near the entrance like she wasn't sure she was allowed to step in farther, her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. Snow melted in her hair, dripping down her cheeks like delayed tears. "What's your name?" he asked softly, keeping his voice steady and low, the way he used to talk to shaken civilians overseas. "Leela," she whispered. "I live down the road." The trailer with the broken porch. Ethan nodded. He passed it before leaning sideways, windows patched with cardboard, a rusted truck sitting dead in the yard. A place no child should have to call home, especially in winter. He offered her a blanket, but she didn't reach for it. Not until he gently set it around her shoulders. Only then did she cling to the fabric, jaw trembling. Her eyes drifted to the fireplace, where the 3 puppies slept in a fragile pile of warmth and trust. "They're alive," she breathed, a mix of relief and heartbreak flooding her voice. "I thought," she stopped herself, squeezing her eyes shut. "He said nobody would find them, that they'd just disappear." Ethan swallowed hard as he crouched beside her. "You did good coming here. You saved them." Her lips quivered. "He's going to be so mad I left." A shadow passed over her face, like she was bracing for impact even though nothing was near her. Ethan's voice firmed, a quiet strength in it. "No one's hurting you tonight. Not while you're here." She looked at him, searching his face. Maybe for lies. Maybe for the kind of safety she'd never been offered before. It took a few seconds, but her shoulders finally dropped just slightly, like she allowed herself a fraction of trust. The puppies stirred, and Leela immediately moved to them, kneeling beside the blanket. She touched the smallest one with trembling fingers. "That one. That's Peanut. He always hid behind the others. I used to sneak them food because my stepdad said dogs were useless." Anger flickered in Ethan's chest, hot, fast, familiar. He had seen cruelty in war, but the kind done to children and helpless animals struck deeper, in a place soldiers never fully armored. Leela kept her eyes on Peanut. "He threw them in the ravine because they were crying too loud. I screamed at him to stop, and he shoved me into the snow." Her lower lip trembled. "He said I better shut up or I joined them." Ethan clenched his jaw, restraining the urge to pace or punch something. "Leela," he said carefully, "has he hurt you before?" She hesitated. That hesitation was the answer. He took a slow breath. The storm outside slammed against the cabin again, rattling the window panes. Inside, the fire crackled, throwing soft amber light over Leela's frightened face. She whispered, "He drinks a lot. He gets angry at everything, he says. He says he's the man of the house and nobody tells him what to do." Ethan had heard variations of that line from too many broken households during his time working humanitarian detail overseas. It was never a good sign. "Is your mom there?" Ethan asked. Leela shook her head. "She works night shifts at the diner in town. She thinks he changed, but he didn't. He just hides it better in front of her." Thunder rolled through the mountains, muted by the falling snow. The cabin glowed with firelight, but darkness pressed hard against the windows, as if the storm wanted to swallow everything inside. "Where is he now?" Ethan asked. Leela's voice dropped to a scared whisper. "Probably looking for me." Ethan's blood ran cold, but his mind stayed sharp. His training didn't allow panic, only calculated steps. He checked the latch on the door, pulled the curtains closed, then returned to Leela and crouched in front of her again. "You did the right thing coming here," he said. "No matter what he told you, none of this is your fault." Her eyes filled again, but the tears didn't fall. Maybe she'd learned to cry silently. Ethan stood and grabbed a pot to warm water for Coco. It was an instinct, something simple, something normal to remind her the world still had gentle corners. While he worked, Leela watched the fire as if memorizing its safety. "You were a soldier?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely above the crackle of flames. "A SEAL," he replied. "Retired. Is that why you weren't scared in the storm?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Oh, I was scared. But sometimes you move anyway." Leela took that and slowly, like a lesson she wasn't sure she was allowed to learn, she sipped the cocoa he handed her, hands wrapped around the mug, shoulders tucked forward. For a moment, the world softened, the puppies shifted, snuggling deeper into the blanket, and Leela exhaled shakily. I just wanted them safe, she whispered. I didn't think anyone would help. Ethan looked at her gently, and as her eyes met his, there was a silent question, one that lived in every child who had been let down too many times. Why did you help? His answer was simple, quiet, and true. Because someone should have. She nodded, a tiny movement, like something inside her loosened. Have you ever had someone step in for you when no one else would? Write yes and tell me their name. Gratitude can travel farther than we realize. Asterisk. For a few minutes, the cabin felt like a fragile little world stitched together by warmth, flickering firelight, and the soft breaths of 3 rescued puppies. But outside, the storm had not eased. Wine battered the wooden walls like restless fists, and snow piled higher against the porch. The night felt suspended, danger waiting somewhere just beyond the glass. Leela set her empty mug down carefully, as if afraid any noise might break whatever safety she'd found. She kept glancing toward the door, flinching at every sudden gust of wind. Ethan noticed. You're safe here, he said again, softer this time. She nodded but didn't fully believe it. Trauma didn't vanish just because someone kind had said the right words. The puppies rustled in their blanket pile, and Leela immediately reached for them, checking each with gentle fingers. Peanut's breathing better, she whispered. He likes the fire. He always liked warm things. Ethan watched how her shoulders relaxed only when she looked at the puppies. They were her anchor, her reason for braving the storm, her act of courage. He sat across from her. You did something brave tonight. Leela blinked as if the compliment confused her. I just couldn't leave them. Most people would have looked away. Ethan replied. You didn't. The wind roared again, and she wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. He'll be so angry when he finds out they're gone. He gets furious when I don't listen. Ethan's expression darkened. There were too many stories like hers in the world, children punished for the sins of those meant to protect them. He could feel the instinct rising again, to shield, to defend, to fix what had been broken, but he forced himself to take it slow. Rushing could make things worse. Has anyone at school noticed anything? He asked gently. She shrugged one shoulder. I don't talk much. People don't really see me. That hit harder than he expected. A child used to invisibility. Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Leela, I'm not letting you go back there tonight. Your mom gets off work at what time? 3 or 4. Depends on the customers. Do you know where she keeps her phone? At the diner? She leaves it there so my stepdad won't go through it. Smart. Heartbreaking, but smart. We'll call her in the morning, Ethan said. Explain everything. She deserves to know. Leela didn't respond. She stared into the fire, her lips pressing together tightly. After a long moment, she whispered, She won't believe me. Why do you think that? Because he tells her I'm dramatic, that I lie, and sometimes she believes him. Leela swallowed. She says he's just stressed. Ethan's hands curled into fists before he forced them open again. A man who hurts an animal will hurt a child. A man who silences a child will twist a woman's mind until she doubts her own daughter. He'd seen that pattern too many times to chalk it up to stress. He took a slow breath. Then we'll show her the truth. How? Ethan didn't answer immediately. His mind sifted through possibilities, each one requiring care. This wasn't a battlefield where solutions came through force. This was a girl's life, and one wrong move could make it worse. First, he said, we keep you safe. Then the rest will follow. Leela stared at him, really stared, as if trying to decide whether safety was something she was allowed to accept. Finally, she nodded once. A soft whine came from the fire. Peanut was shifting, his tiny paws stretching weakly. Leela stroked his head. They're cold, she said. They're little paws. They always get cold first. I'll get more towels, Ethan said. He stood and walked to the linen shelf, grabbing two old but clean towels and warming them by the fire before layering them over the pups. Steam rose from the fabric as the heat seeped in. Leela brushed a tear from her cheek. Pretending she wasn't crying, Ethan didn't call attention to it. Instead, he said quietly, "We'll get them checked by the vet first thing in the morning." "He won't let us," Leela whispered. "Who won't?" "My stepdad. He watches everything. If he finds out they're alive." She stopped, hands tightening around Peanut. Ethan froze. A distant noise cut through the storm, sharp, metallic, unnatural. Leela looked up, eyes widening. That wasn't the wind. Ethan moved quickly, crossing the room to peer through a gap in the curtain. Darkness, snow, trees bending like desperate witnesses. Then there, a flicker. Movement near the tree line. Someone was out there. The same prickling instinct from earlier returned, stronger, clearer. Someone wasn't just searching the area. Someone was watching the cabin. Leela's breath hitched. "It's him." Ethan's voice dropped to a controlled murmur. "Stay close to the puppies. Don't go near the windows. I'll handle this." She nodded, trembling, eyes glued to the flickering shadows. Ethan stepped back from the window, heart steady despite the situation. His training settled over him like an old familiar code. Calm, alert, ready. "Ethan," Leela whispered. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm right here." Now it was more than puppies that needed rescuing. A child needed a shield. And Ethan Ward had never failed a mission he chose to take. "Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below, so someone scrolling tonight remembers that kindness still exists." The cabin seemed to shrink as silence settled over it, thick, cold, and watchful. Ethan's breath steadied, each inhale measured, each exhale controlled. He didn't move toward the door immediately. Instead, he listened. The storm had become a curtain, its roar masking every smaller sound beneath it, making it impossible to know if the danger was near or just out of sight. Leela crouched beside the puppies, shielding them with her body as if her small frame could protect them from whatever lurked in the dark. Her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed fixed on Ethan with a desperate trust that made his chest tighten. He knelt beside her. "You did nothing wrong," he whispered. "Remember that. But he'll be mad I'm here. He always finds me," she whispered back. Ethan gently touched her shoulder. "Not tonight." A gust slammed into the wall, shaking the cabin. Leela flinched hard, burying her face against Peanut's fur. Ethan rose again, mind racing through every possibility. An angry man fueled by alcohol and rage. A storm that made visibility nearly zero. And a terrified child who had run for her life. He wasn't letting anyone near her. He moved quietly toward the back room, where he kept his emergency kit and a flashlight strong enough to cut through the thickest fog. When he returned, Leela was sitting cross-legged, her arms wrapped around the puppies as if they were her lifeline. "Ethan," she whispered, voice thin. "I'm just checking the perimeter," he said gently. "I'll be back in a minute." "Door stays locked. Understand." Her nod was small but sharp. He cracked the door open and stepped onto the snow-covered porch. The wind slapped him immediately, cold and fierce, tugging at his jacket. Snowflakes stung his face like tiny needles. Visibility stretched only a few feet before dissolving into swirling white. But he felt it. Someone had been here. That metallic noise hadn't been nature. He swept the flashlight across the tree line, watching branches sway violently. Nothing. No footprints. Either the storm erased evidence as fast as it created it. Whoever had been out there was either long gone or smart enough to move without leaving a trail, or close enough to be hidden. Ethan scanned again, slower this time, his instincts humming. Training sharpened his senses. Every shift of the wind, every creak of ice-laden branches, every flicker of shadow. Something felt wrong. Not obvious, not overt, but wrong in the way that made soldiers turn their heads before seeing anything. After another minute, he stepped back inside, locking the door behind him. Leela looked up at him, hope flickering faintly in her eyes. "Is he there?" she asked. "I didn't see anyone," Ethan said honestly, "but the storm's covering everything. We'll stay cautious." Her fingers tightened nervously in the puppy's fur. "He gets worse when he's drunk. Sometimes he throws things. Sometimes he breaks Mom's things on purpose." She paused. "She tries to pretend it's okay." Ethan sat across from her again, lowering himself slowly so he wouldn't intimidate her. Leela, has he ever hurt you directly? She hesitated. A long, painful hesitation. When I talk back, she whispered. Or, when I try to protect the puppies. He says I'm too soft, that I'm stupid, that nothing good ever comes from being kind. Her eyes filled, but she blinked fast to hide it. Ethan breathed in sharply. A man telling a child that kindness was worthless, that was violence even before any hand was raised. He leaned forward, his voice steady and firm. He's wrong. Leela looked up. Kindness is strength, Ethan said. It takes courage to care. It takes power to stand up for something small. You're not weak, Leela, you're brave. Her lip trembled. But he says. I don't care what he says, Ethan interrupted softly. I care what I see. And I see a kid who saved 3 lives tonight. She stared at him, eyes glistening, as if no one had ever said that to her before. Peanut let out a tiny sigh and nuzzled deeper into her lap. She stroked his head gently and whispered, I just didn't want them to die. You did everything right, Ethan said again. A sudden thought gripped her. When he finds out they're gone, he'll blame me. He won't get near you, Ethan said firmly. Not while you're here. Leela drew in a shaky breath. You really mean that? Every word. The fire popped, sending a small shower of sparks up the chimney. Their warm glow played over Leela's face, softening the bruised fear that had lived there too long. For the first time since she'd arrived, a tiny, fragile sense of safety began to settle around her. She leaned her head slightly toward Peanut, lips brushing his fur. Thank you, she whispered, maybe to Ethan, maybe to the universe, maybe just to herself. Then she lifted her eyes to him once more. Do you think Mom will believe me this time? Ethan hesitated, not because he doubted the mother's love, but because abuse twisted truth until the victims themselves questioned it. He reached out and gently placed a blanket around Leela's shoulders again. We'll show her proof, he said. Together. A single tear slid down her cheek, not from fear this time, but from the sudden shock of being believed. If that moment hit you deeply, drop a in the comments. Sometimes one small symbol says what our hearts can't. Asterisk. The storm dragged into the late hours, wrapping the world in a cold, suffocating hush. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low, casting a softer, gentler glow over the room. Leela finally stopped shaking enough to sit comfortably, her legs tucked under her, the puppies sleeping in a tight ball against her stomach. Every so often, Peanut's tiny paw twitched, and she smiled faintly, one of the first real smiles he'd seen from her. Ethan watched her from across the room as he adjusted another log onto the fire. The flames rose slowly, lighting his face in warm tones. He didn't speak. He didn't want to break whatever delicate peace she had found. After a moment, Leela let her eyes drift around the cabin, across the small bookshelf, the old wooden table, the dusty window frames, absorbing everything like she was memorizing a place she might never see again. This is the safest I've felt in a long time, she whispered. Ethan sat back down, his elbows resting on his knees. That's how it should always feel, he said, especially for a kid. Leela drew a slow breath, her fingers rubbing softly along Peanut's fur. He used to be different, she said quietly. My stepdad, when Mom first met him, he was normal, friendly. He used to bring me candy from the gas station. What changed? Ethan asked, not pushing, just opening the door gently. She stared at the fire, her voice barely audible. After they got married, after he moved in, he started yelling more, drinking more, and when Mom would work late, he'd tell me to stay in my room. He didn't want me around. Ethan nodded slowly. Stories like this weren't new to him, yet each one carved a fresh wound. And the puppies? He asked. Her voice cracked. I found the first one in the alley behind the diner 2 months ago. He was so tiny. I hid him under my bed for a whole week before my stepdad found him, and he threw him outside in the cold. She wiped her cheek quickly. I tried to keep the other to secret, but he heard them crying tonight. Ethan's jaw tensed. He forced it to loosen. Anger wouldn't help her right now. Leela glanced toward the window again. Do you think he's still out there? I think he won't get far in this storm, Ethan answered honestly. But tomorrow, Yes, we'll have to be prepared. She swallowed hard. He's going to say I'm lying. He always does. That's why we're getting the sheriff involved, Ethan said firmly. And child services. And your mother. Her breath quickened in panic. No, if he finds out I told. He won't touch you, Ethan said, voice deepening with a steel she didn't fully understand. Not with me here, and not after tonight. You're not fighting this alone. She blinked rapidly, tears catching the firelight. Nobody's ever said that to me before. Then it's long overdue. For several moments, neither spoke. The wind weakened slightly, still present, still heavy, but losing some of its fury. Ethan took the small break in the storm as a gift. Leela, he said softly, tomorrow is going to be hard. But it's also the first step towards something better. You deserve a life without fear. She nodded slowly, the weight of years sitting behind that small motion. The puppies stirred again, and Leela tucked the blanket closer around them. Peanut looks warmer, she murmured. That's thanks to you, Ethan said. You kept them alive. I don't know how to explain all of this to Mom, she whispered. You don't have to do it alone, he replied. The reassurance seemed to unravel something inside her. She lifted Peanut and held him to her chest like a soft shield. Ethan, do you think people can change? He inhaled slowly. Some can. Some choose not to. She stared at her hands. I always hoped he'd be the kind who changes. That hope says a lot about who you are, Ethan said gently. You don't want people to be bad. You want to believe the best. That's not weakness, Leela, that's strength. She looked up at him, eyes shining with uncertainty. After everything he did, do you think I'm supposed to forgive him? Ethan didn't answer right away. The fire crackled between them, casting small shadows on the walls. Forgiveness is a choice, he said eventually, but it should never be forced, not when the wounds are still open. Sometimes forgiving means letting go, not letting someone back in. Her breath trembled. I don't know if I can. You don't have to know right now. The truth in his tone reached her. Soft and steady. And then she whispered, would you forgive him, if it were you? Ethan's eyes softened, haunted memories flickering for half a second before he buried them again. I'd forgive to free myself, he said. But I'd never forget. Be honest after everything Leela has been through. Could you forgive someone like that? Type forgive if you could, or never if the wound would be too deep. Asterisk. The fire settled into a quiet rhythm, its soft crackle mixing with the muffled hum of the storm outside. Leela rested her head against the couch cushion now, exhaustion pulling at her small frame. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was fading, leaving behind a fragile kind of stillness. The puppies slept curled against her side, tiny breaths rising and falling in uneven patterns. Ethan watched her from the armchair across the room, his mind turning over every detail of what needed to happen come morning. Phone calls, authorities, medical checks, making sure her stepfather couldn't twist this into a lie. He'd navigated battlefield chaos, insurgent threats, and moral gray zones overseas. Yet this situation carried a different weight entirely, the kind that lodged in a man's chest. Leela's voice broke the quiet. Do you think the sheriff will believe me? She asked, her tone uncertain, almost timid, as if afraid to hear the answer. I do, Ethan said, and I'll be right there with you when we talk to him. She swallowed hard. My stepdad always says nobody listens to kids, that grown-ups only believe other grown-ups. Ethan shook his head. Then he's wrong about that too. Leela pulled the blanket tighter around herself. He told my mom one time that I get confused, that I make things up when I'm scared. She blinked fast. But I never lied. I was just afraid. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Fear doesn't make your truth any less real. Her expression softened in a way that made his chest ache. No child should be surprised to hear that their truth mattered. The storm outside groaned again, but it was different now, a lower rumbling, like it was beginning to tire. Snow still whipped across the windows, but not as fiercely. The worst had passed. Leela looked toward the crack in the curtain. Do you think he's still looking for me? I don't know, Ethan said honestly, but I do know he won't get through that storm, and you won't get past me. A small, trembling breath left her. Nobody ever. protects me. You're protected now, he said, his voice soft but certain. Silence fell again, but it wasn't the heavy, frightening kind from earlier. It was gentler, like Leela was slowly allowing herself to believe the moment was real. A single log popped in the fire, sending sparks fluttering up the chimney. Leela watched the embers float, her eyes half-lidded. Ethan stood quietly and walked to the kitchen, pouring water into a kettle. When he returned with a second warm drink, she lifted her head. "For me?" she asked. "For you," he said. Her fingers wrapped around the mug, absorbing its heat like it was something sacred. She took a small sip, then whispered, "Mom used to make hot chocolate for me when I was younger." Before everything got complicated, Ethan sat beside her on the floor, his back against the couch. "You deserve simple things again. Warm things. Safe things." Leela stared into the cup. "Sometimes I feel like I ruined everything. Like if I had just been better, he wouldn't be so angry all the time." Ethan turned to her, his voice firm. "Leela, listen to me. You didn't cause his anger. You didn't cause his choices. Adults are responsible for their behavior, not kids." Her eyes filled instantly. "But he said." "He lied," Ethan said softly. "And you've lived with that lie for too long." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it. Instead, she let it fall, as if releasing something she'd been holding onto for years. Thunder rolled faintly in the distance, but the storm's fury was fading with each passing minute. Ethan noticed that the world outside slowly loosening its grip. Leela leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment, her breathing evening out. Ethan didn't speak. He let her be. After a long pause, she whispered, "Do you think things can get better from here?" Ethan looked at her, the fire reflecting in his steady eyes. "Yes," he said simply. "I've seen broken places heal. I've seen people get back what they thought they lost forever. You're not stuck in this, Leela. You're walking towards something better already." She opened her eyes slowly, the smallest spark of belief flickering within them. "I hope so," she murmured. Dottie nodded softly. "Hope is where the change begins." Her gaze drifted back to the puppies, all of them nestled safely. Peanut's tiny paw rested gently across her wrist, as if grounding her. Ethan smiled faintly. "They're going to be okay. And so are you." Leela breathed in shakily, letting the warmth of those words sink into her bones. "If you believe that hope still rises even from the hardest storms, come an amen. Someone scrolling tonight may need to see a little light." By the time the first hint of gray touched the sky, the storm had exhausted itself into a tired hush. Snow still clung to the windows in thick, icy sheets, but the winds had softened to a low whisper that drifted across the mountains like a sigh. The world outside looked buried, silent, untouched, yet inside the cabin, the air felt warmer, steadier, somehow safer. Leela slept curled on the couch now, wrapped in 2 blankets, her breathing soft and even. The puppies were sprawled around her stomach, their tiny chests rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Peanut was closest to her heart, tucked near the crook of her elbow. Ethan sat in the armchair, boots still on, watching over all of them like a silent sentinel. He hadn't slept, couldn't, not when morning meant decisions, big ones, calls that would change Leela's life forever, and he would be the one standing between her and whatever backlash came next. As dawn crept across the sky, Ethan finally rose, stretching his stiff back. He stepped quietly toward the kitchen, trying not to wake her, but a soft voice caught him mid-step. "Is it morning?" Leela blinked at him sleepily, her hair a messy halo, eyes still, heavy with exhaustion. "Yeah," Ethan said gently. "You slept a few hours." She sat up slowly, careful not to disturb the puppies. "Did anything happen? Did he come back?" "No," Ethan said firmly. "Nobody came near the cabin." Leela let out a breath she'd been holding all night. For the first time since she arrived, her shoulders relaxed fully, without fear waiting right behind them. Ethan poured her a cup of warm tea. "We need to call the sheriff," he said. "And your mom." Leela's eyes dropped. "I'm scared." "I know," Ethan said, sitting opposite her. "But you're not alone." She nodded weakly. "Will they take the puppies away?" "No," Ethan promised. "Not from you." Leela's eyes softened. "I just want them safe. they will be. The puppies yawned, stretching their tiny paws. Peanut waddled into her lap and curled up instantly. She giggled, quiet, bright, unbelievably pure. A sound that didn't belong to trauma. A sound that belonged to healing. Ethan, she whispered. Yeah, what if he lies to them? What if he says I'm making everything up? Ethan met her eyes calmly. Then I'll tell them what I saw, and I'll show them what you saved. He nodded toward the puppies. They're proof of everything he did. Her hand rested on Peanut, fingers brushing his soft fur. I don't want him to hurt Mom anymore either. Ethan hesitated. Leela, does he hurt her too? Leela didn't speak for a moment. Her lower lip trembled. He yells at her. Breaks things. Once he threw a plate at the wall behind her head. She swallowed. But she tells me he's just tired after work. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. That kind of denial, he'd seen it too many times. She deserves better, he said softly. So do you. Leela wiped at her cheek with the back of her hand. I'm scared she'd choose him. She won't, Ethan said gently. Not once she knows the truth. Leela looked down. Maybe. He handed her the warm tea, and she held it with both hands, blowing on it. Will you stay when we talk to them? She asked. Please. I'll be right there. Her eyes glistened again. She nodded, swallowing thickly. Okay. The puppies began exploring the room now, stumbling on their tiny legs, noses sniffing at everything. Leela watched them, a small smile forming. It's like they're not scared anymore, she said. They know they're safe. Ethan replied. Leela took a shaky breath. Do you think I can feel safe too? One day. You already started, he said warmly. Last night was your first step. Her gaze softened, filling with something fragile, but growing like the first spark of belief that life didn't have to stay dark. The sun pulled higher now, melting the frost on the windows. A beam of golden morning light spilled into the cabin, landing across Leela's blanket and Peanut's tiny body. She looked at the brightness for a long time, then whispered, Ethan, thank you for not letting me be alone. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. You'll never have to be again. Her eyes drifted back to the puppies. Peanut barked a tiny sound, high and squeaky, for the first time since she arrived. Leela laughed, a real laugh, soft, broken, hopeful. And the whole cabin warmed with it. If this story has touched your heart, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for Leela, for Peanut, and for every child who finds courage in the dark. One click tells them, I felt your pain, and I'm rooting for your healing. Asterisk morning brightened the cabin slowly, melting the last traces of night from the windows. The storm had left the world quiet, blanketed in untouched white. It was as if the mountains themselves were trying to give Leela a clean slate. Ethan checked his phone, barely any signal, but enough to get a call out if he stepped onto the porch. Leela stood beside him, bundled in her blanket, the puppies tucked into the pocket of her oversized hoodie like living warmth. Are you ready? He asked gently. She nodded, though her fingers twisted nervously in the fabric. Can we call Mom first? Of course. He opened the door, letting a wave of crisp, fresh air rush in. The storm had buried the porch in knee-deep snow, but the sky was clear now, a pale blue stretching over the quiet town below. Ethan stepped outside, just far enough to keep signal, keeping Leela close to him. Her breath puffed softly into the cold, her eyes fixed on the horizon as if searching for answers there. He dialed the diner's number. It rang once, twice, then a woman's familiar voice answered through exhaustion. Dolly's Diner. This is a Mrs. Harper. Ethan cut in gently. The voice paused. Yes, who is this? My name is Ethan Ward. I live out by Timber Ridge. I have your daughter with me. She's safe. There was a sharp inhale. Leela. She didn't come home last night. I thought maybe she stayed with a friend I didn't know. Oh God, is she okay? Leela leaned in, her voice trembling. Mom, I'm here. Leela. Her mother's voice cracked. Baby, I was so worried. Why didn't you call? Why are you out there? Did something happen? Did he? The words stumbled and broke. Ethan watched Leela struggle for breath. Her courage from last night had shrunk now in the daylight, but she pushed through it. Mom. He threw the puppies in the ravine, she whispered. He said he'd hurt me if I told. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. There was only silence from the other end. Not disbelief. Not denial. Just silence, heavy, breaking, painful. Then Leela's mother spoke, her voice shaking as if a truth she had been running from finally hit her. Honey, I'm so sorry. He told me you were lying. He always made it sound like you were exaggerating. I didn't want to believe her voice cracked. Leela, baby, I should have listened. Leela pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling. Mom, Ethan gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Mrs. Harper continued, voice stronger now. I'm coming. I'm leaving work right now. Don't go anywhere. Okay. Stay with the man you're with. Please don't go back to the trailer. We won't, Ethan said. I'll be there in 20 minutes, and I'm calling the sheriff. This ends today. The call ended. Leela let out a breath that shook her whole body. The puppies squirmed in her hoodie, sensing her trembling. Peanut poked his nose out near her chin, as if trying to comfort her. Ethan crouched beside her. You did it. I'm scared, she whispered. That's okay, he said gently. Courage ain't about not being scared. It's about moving anyway. She leaned against him, not fully, just enough to show trust. They went back inside to wait. The minutes passed slowly, the fire warming the room as sunlight streamed through the windows. Leela sat on the couch, holding Peanut close. Ethan fixed her a small breakfast, though she was too anxious to eat much. Then headlights cut across the snow outside. Leela stood abruptly. That's her, she breathed. The knock on the door came moments later, soft, frantic, trembling. Ethan opened it. A woman, tired eyes, messy hair from a long shift, apron still on, rushed inside before the cold could follow her. Leela, she cried, falling to her knees and pulling her daughter into her arms. Leela truly broke, collapsing into her mother as tears flowed freely. All the fear, all the uncertainty, all the long nights spent bracing for footsteps in the hall, they spilled out in one raw, shaking sob. Mrs. Harper held her tightly, whispering, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have protected you. I should have seen it. Ethan stepped back, giving them space. Then after long minutes, the sheriff's vehicle pulled up next. A tall man stepped out, scanning the scene with the seriousness that belonged in a courtroom. Ethan explained everything. Leela, trembling but brave, added her part. She showed the puppies, showed what her stepfather had done. The sheriff didn't hesitate. I'll take care of it, he said grimly. He won't come near either of you again. Mrs. Harper held Leela tighter. The moment felt like the first sunrise after a long, hopeless night. Later, when the sheriff left and the immediate danger was gone, Leela approached Ethan with Peanut in her arms. Thank you, she whispered, for helping me, for helping them. Ethan knelt. You saved them first. I just helped you finish it. She shook her head. No, you saved me too. He didn't correct her. Some truths didn't need adjusting. Mrs. Harper embraced him next. I don't have words, but thank you for giving my daughter a chance to be heard. Ethan nodded softly. She's stronger than she realizes. As they walked toward the car, Leela turned back one last time. Will I see you again? She asked. Ethan smiled gently. Whenever you need. And as she climbed into the car with Peanut on her lap, finally safe, finally believed, a warm, quiet stillness filled the cabin. Outside, the sun rose higher over Timber Ridge. A new beginning, a safer life, a story that didn't end in darkness, but stepped bravely into light. No act of kindness is ever small, not when it's the only light someone has left. And sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is simply tell the truth, and hope someone finally listens.